Hey, what's up guys? Tim here again. Got a brand new video for you today and doing something slightly different, and it is knife related because as you guys know, there is some knife related stuff in my content on my channel here. So what we're doing today is testing and review of this sharpening stone. So I have to tell you that this is a sponsored video. So I was contacted by this company and they offered to send me this stone here for review and testing. And in return, I'd have to do a video about it and let you guys know what I think. So just a quick word about sponsored videos. If you guys enjoy, watching a YouTube channel, I really feel like, if you see them, that channel doing a sponsored video, you should be happy for them because that means that channel is, generating a source of revenue, and that means, those videos can continue, right? So in the end, videos like this are all for the benefit of the channel. And at the same time, though, I'll never review stuff that's, completely unrelated. Like I'm not going to be doing, I don't know, reviews on like face cream or something like that, right? So yeah, so that all out of the way, let's just do a quick intro into this product. So this is a sharpening stone by a company called Pebble there. And as you can see, it's got this cool stand here. I'll get into that in a sec. It's got two sides. It's got a 6,000 grit side here and 1,000 here. So fine and kind of more like a medium side. And yeah, this is a Waterstone or whetstone, so you do have to soak this in water before using it. So before we do our test, we will be pre-soaking it. And then just about some of the stuff it comes with. It's got this really cool kind of rubber base. And this, so if you're sharpening, say we're going to start on the 1,000 side. This kind of lines up onto the stone like so. And it fits on top like that, right? And then now this then sits on the base here, which is really nice. It keeps it nice and stable. So this base here is, I think it's, it's some sort of wood, but it is sealed. So when you get water on it, it's not going to crack or warp. And it's got a really nice rubber bottom on it. So again, there's a good amount of grip. So when you're using this, it's not going to move around, which is really, really nice. Like I have used this once for my own testing, just to like sharpen a kitchen knife, but we'll be doing a full test today. Also, it does come with this kind of angle guide, and we're not using this today though because I know a good amount of. I think I'm somewhat proficient in freehand sharpening. Is what I'm trying to say. So I think the way this thing works is you put the knife in here. You get the blade to kind of stick out, and then you do this. But we're not using this. Okay, so you don't have to use that. Okay, so before we get started, we're going to soak the stone, and I'm going to put that in water. It's probably going to take about anywhere from 15 to 20 minutes, and then we'll get into testing on what we're going to sharpen. Okay. And so for the knife we're sharpening today, we're going to be sharpening one of my favorite knives. It's my Brad Southard custom Dawes. It's not dull by any means, but it could use a bit of a touch up. And a lot of times the way I gauge how sharp a knife is by cutting a bit of paracord. And by the way, this surface you see here is a cutting mat. It's really, really nice just for working in general. But hey, you might want to try out one of these for your working surfaces for paracording and stuff if you ever need to cut and melt stuff. Anyways, quick test is with a bit of paracord. So this knife is the CRKT Scoshi. It's brand new, so it's still very, very sharp. I haven't used it that much, but what I like to do is I try to press down and push cut some paracord, and if it comes off like really easily, like that, I find the knife is very, very sharp, right? Like that. Okay. So with my Brad Southard, it's my Dawes. It's still decently sharp, but when I press down, let's see, go right here. When I press down on it, like I still have to do a bit of a sawing motion to get through to the end, which is not bad, but I guess for me this is a bit of a benchmark for me. It's just if you can push cut paracord really cleanly. See, it's still a little frayed there. If you can push cut it really cleanly, I find that's more than adequately sharp. But at the same time, the edge on this knife is still very good. It's going to cut cardboard, paper, whatever you need. But so we're going to be touching up really the sharpness on this knife. We're not doing a full, like going from butter knife dull to razor sharp. Okay. So we're going to do that. And yeah, let's move on. Okay. And one last Okay, and one last thing before we get into the technique while my, Waterstone is still soaking. So I wanted to go through a really quick explanation of what's really happening when you're freehand sharpening a knife, or sharpening any knife for that matter. Because I feel like if you kind of understand what's happening, you'll be able to do a better job. Okay, so, before, disclaimer, I don't claim to be an expert on freehand sharpening. I'm no Murray Carter, but I like to think I have a decent understanding of what's going on. So let's just get into it. So what you want to think about is your knife as, what I like to draw is kind of like a cross section of a knife. Okay, so if you look at the knife, let's just say we'll use this knife. It's flat ground. So we've got one side of the knife and another. This is like an extreme close-up of the knife, right? Okay, and then so think of the knife like this. Okay, you're looking at it this way, just a section of it. So these are the two sides of the knife, the kind of primary bevel. This is where it's like the first grind is, right? And then now this kind of tip here, this part, that's your edge, okay? That very, very tip part, see the kind of shiny part, that's the edge. So when you're sharpening, all you're really doing is grinding away material on these edges here and here, right? And when you're freehand sharpening, the key is just matching up that angle so that the stone, like say this side, this is the sharpening stone, you're matching up the angle of the knife to that stone. And then whenever you pass it along that stone, you're removing material, right? Because if you look at, say, an edge of a knife that's dull, we have our cross section again. If you look at the edge, sometimes it might be kind of folded over like that. So this is a really big exaggeration. The edge might be kind of folded over like this because you might have a roll in it from something you cut, or it might be chipped, right? So it might actually look like flat like that if you look at a really close up of it. And when you're sharpening, all you're really doing is making that edge kind of true and straight again on both sides and evenly, right? So that's just how I like to think about sharpening a knife. I feel like if you know that, then you kind of understand better what's going on. And also, one last little drawing. One very big key is sharpening the entire bevel. So again, we have our bevel here. If your angle is kind of say slightly off, so this is the sharpening stone. If it's a little off like that, right, you're only sharpening the sort of kind of what do you call it? It's not really the heel, but the top part of the bevel. You're not sharpening it all the way to the very end of the bevel, right? You want to sharpen it closer all the way out there. So that's what you'll hear me say apexing the edge. That means you're dragging the knife across the stone all the way to the very edge of the blade. Because if your angle is slightly off, right, and it's say like this, then you're not getting the tip of the edge of the knife. You're just sharpening the kind of upper part of the bevel. And if you go too much, then you're kind of going too far, and then you might be, your angle's not matching. You might be almost reprofiling your blade. All right. I hope that made sense. I don't know. All right. So that's just a really brief explanation, or as brief as I can make it, about sharpening. So that being said, let's get into the sharpening part. Okay. So my stone is soaked now. It's no longer taking water. Well, I'm really making sure it's not taking water by, so I've got just a, if you don't have a squirt bottle, just get a regular old water bottle, and you can just poke a hole in the cap, and then you can use that kind of just to add water to your stone. So one thing about using these water stones is you want to keep them wet. That's why I've got my kind of working surface here, because keeping it wet kind of gives it that lubrication and allows you to keep that, it gives you feedback is what it gives you, so you can know what you're doing. And a lot of it you'll find later on, you're just going by feel, and you'll know if you're matching the edge or not. So one quick tip I can give you guys is if you look at the edge here, we want to apex that edge. We want to sharpen all of it. And this edge is pretty lean in that it's quite thin. It's not like, let me show you on my CRKT here. See how the bevel, basically the shiny part, is really wide here? You know, on my southern here, it's very, very lean. Okay, so this trick I'm going to show you with the marker, it will be a lot easier on knives that have a wider bevel. But anyways, so just take a regular old Sharpie marker, and what you can do is, all you do is just color in the bevel of the marker. Let's get in focus here. I'm using autofocus, so it might take a sec. You want to color in the bevel here, like this. It's okay if you get the marker on the blade. So you just color in like that, okay? So now, when you do your first pass, what you'll do is you'll take one swipe, and then you look at that bevel, and you see where the marker has been removed. So if it's not all the way to the edge, that means you need to tilt a little bit more forward. If it's only at the very back of the bevel, like closer to this side, if it's only on this side, that means you need to go a bit more acutely, right? So it's really just finding that edge. That's the secret. And the bevels on this knife are pretty even, but for some reason, whoever did the last reprofiling here, they went all the way back here, and it's a little wide, but that's okay. You know, I'll just put the Sharpie on this side too. Okay, so we'll color that in, and there we go. And after our first few strikes, you'll find kind of a general idea of what that bevel should be. Okay. All right, so here we go. This is a little awkward for me because I'm doing this with a camera in my face. Normally I'm, don't have anything, but let's try it out. So you want to start up top, and you want to go from the heel of the blade all the way to the tip. And I like to put my finger on the tip here. Let's get it right here on the tip here, just so I don't go, you don't want to go off the stone either. So let's just kind of figure it out. I think that's good. A little more water. Okay, that was one. So let's go all the way to the edge here. Oops, sorry, I went off a little camera. There you go. So, see, you can tell by the first strike. See, I didn't go all the way to the very tip there. I kind of missed. And then the rest of it, I think I did okay. There's just a hair of Sharpie at the very edge there, so I need to go a little more upwards like that. Okay, so that's really the whole purpose of the Sharpie, is to help you find that proper angle. So now I was just doing single swipes, but later on when you get a little more comfortable, you can kind of just do your swipe, and then when you're going back, you can kind of keep it on the same angle and then just move it back. You don't have to lift it off the stone, but don't apply any pressure when you're going back, just when you're going forward, and then you can kind of just let it glide on the stone when you're going backwards, right? So you kind of don't have to keep resetting your angle. So let's just do a few passes. So I think I'm doing okay. Again, see, I'm missing that little tip there. It's okay if you need to focus on a little bit of the tip or a certain area. You can always kind of just touch it up there and try to get everything. You'll find a lot of this just comes with practice. So I know I'm missing my tip there. I need to clean it up a bit more. See, and again, this is just a touch-up, right? We're not doing a full-on reprofiling of the blade. Okay. So, and based on what I've used on this stone, the feedback is very good. That's one thing you'll notice about whetstones is they give you a nice feedback, and that's just something you'll have to try. I can't really explain it. Okay, so we did, oh, and in terms of number of passes, you really should be keeping track of how many passes you do, because ideally you want, the same number of passes on each side. I wasn't really keeping track because I was a little distracted talking to you guys, but ideally you want to do an even number of passes on each side. And so we'll go a bit on this side now. Also, some people will say that you should be sharpening until you form a burr. And a burr is when, say this is the edge of your knife, you keep sharpening one side, eventually it's going to roll. Say I'm sharpening on the right side here, eventually it's going to kind of roll over like kind of like this, because you're kind of almost over sharpening it. So all along the blade it'll be kind of to one side. And some people say you should do that. That way you've gotten the whole edge of the blade, you've apexed the blade. And then when you do the other side, then you go all the way back to that side, right? And then you can kind of do a few extra passes just to remove the burr. But if you're using the kind of Sharpie trick, then you don't really need to do that, because you'll know you're getting the entire edge, right? And the Sharpie will come off, obviously, so you can always reapply it as you go. All right, so let's do a few more on this side. And I know I'm not really setting a good example by not really keeping track of the passes I'm doing, but at this point I kind of feel like I can just judge it by by feel. Okay, let's go back to this side. And one thing you'll notice is a lot of this really is just muscle memory, because you want to be using, you can't see my arms, but I'm kind of keeping my shoulders still, and I'm really just using my arms to keep that bevel the same. Because if I use my wrist, there's a lot more variance. You don't want to be doing this with your knife. I mean, I don't know, if you're really good, maybe you can do that. But for me, I like to keep my kind of wrists kind of locked. And I'm kind of really just moving my shoulders back and forth to do this, okay? So you want to continue doing your passes until, on both sides, again, try to keep them as even as possible. You want to do that on both sides until you've apexed the edge. You can also look at the scratch pattern on the knife. It'll be a little harder to see in this light, but if you look, using the stone will generate a scratch pattern on the knife, and you'll see, where you've missed it, right? But again, you can always rely on the Sharpie. So continue this, stage until you feel like you've done enough. And also, when you get to the very end, say you've done maybe 10, 15 passes on each side, depending on how dull your knife is. When you're at the very end and you're about to move on to the next grit, what I like to do is just do a couple passes on each side. Just going one way. I'm lifting it off the stone. That's 3. And go back to this side. Okay, I think that's good. And again, if you got a tip on your knife, make sure you're not pressing down and going off the stone, because that'll dull your tip. But this knife doesn't really have too much of a pointy tip on it. Okay, so I did a couple there, and now I'm just gonna do a couple more just light passes back and forth at the very end here. You want to get your knife as sharp as possible before you move on to the next grit. Okay. All right, I think that's okay. So I'm going to test the sharpness, and if it's all good, just you can slice some magazine paper, you can cut some paracord wherever you want, and then we're going to move on to the next side of the stone. Okay guys, so I've flipped my stone over. I've done as many passes as I need on the blue side, the sort of 1000 side. Now we moved on to the 6000 side. Oh, I apologize if the light's a little harsh. I'm by an open window, or window right up there, so the light does change every now and then. Anyways, so we're on this side now, and I hope it's not too hard to see because it's white and because of the sunlight. But anyways, we're gonna just do the same thing, you know. This is a finer side, it's a lot smoother, so you probably get the feedback might be a little bit harder to detect, but you're just going to do the same thing. Okay, I'm not going to do the Sharpie trick because at this point I feel like I've got the kind of angle dialed in, but yeah, it's the same thing. And I feel like when you get to these finer sides, what was I going to say? Sorry, it's a little hard to talk and do this, but the feedback is, yeah, it's not as harsh and gritty like the other side because it's a lot smoother, but it actually feels a lot nicer. And you can also tell, because this stone is white, you can see where we're removing material. And it may seem like I'm doing a lot of passes, but these stones are actually quite fine, so I'm not removing that much material. Okay, that's okay for one side. Now we're going to go to the other side, same thing. One thing I also noticed is this side of the stone, it doesn't take water as much as, it's not as thirsty as the blue side, let's just say that. So the water tends to just stay on the surface of the stone, which is nice because it really helps with that glide, and you don't have to continually put water on it. Okay. So I'm just going to continue the same method. I'm going to do maybe like 5 or I want to say 10 passes on each side before I switch. I lost count, but anyways. So you want to do just maybe like 10 passes every now and then and switch to the other side. And continue going until the knife is as sharp as possible on this side of the stone. And we'll be more or less done with just a few extra steps at the end. But yeah, you can do the same thing. And if you want, you can continue to do the Sharpie trick to make sure you're getting the whole edge. But I think I'm okay. So I'm just going to continue doing my passes, and then we'll finish it off in the next step. Okay, so I'm done on the fine side now, and my knife is quite sharp. A nice little test you can do is if you're, you don't care about your fingernails like I do. What you want to do, just hold the edge of the blade, just rest it on your thumbnail or fingernail, and don't press down or anything, but just let it rest. And if it catches on your nail, you'll know you've got a decent edge. Okay, so this one is catching quite nicely. If you kind of just rotate it a little bit back and forth, you can see that it's catching on my nail. And if it slides off though, that means you've got a dull spot. Okay, so that's it. I'm more or less done. Now, at this point, what we can do, hold on, just give me a sec, I forgot to grab it. I grab my strop here. This is just a kind of crappy homemade strop I have. It looks crappy, but it serves its purpose. It's just a piece of raw leather, and I've got some polishing compound on it. You can strop your knife at this point, and not to get too much. There's a lot of stropping videos out there, but just a few passes. Just maybe do like, I don't know, 30, 40 each side. You can do some strop on your knife. You can strop the edge. And again, this just refines the edge a little more. And this is optional. You can even use a raw leather belt if you don't have the compound. But this really does take your knife to, it does give it a little bit more sharpness. So again, I'm just using the weight of the knife, and I'm just trying to match that bevel angle. See, I'm not even pressing down on the knife. I'm holding it like this and just letting the weight of the knife do the work. Okay. So you do that enough times and your knife should be plenty sharp. Okay, so now for just a quick sharpness test. Got some flimsy magazine paper. Let's try this. I always find magazine paper is a pretty good way to test sharpness. Yeah, that's pretty good. Not a whole lot of resistance. Yeah, I can even get the little curly cues here. Not too bad at all. And it's always fun to cut up magazine paper, right? Okay. It's pretty good if you can do, you can kind of make some waves there. It looks pretty good too. So that looks good with the magazine paper. Get this mess out of the way. Let's cut some paracord. See if we can push cut it. It's not bad. Oh, need to push a little harder, but still pretty good. Yeah, just moving my mat there. Sorry. But yeah, pretty good with the paracord. It's not too bad. Yeah, that's good. I would say that's pretty good. You know, in my books, a knife that can kind of pop paracord apart like that, slice through magazine paper, it's good enough. You know, you don't need it to have a hair whittling edge, because to be honest, like, hair whittling edge is more of like a proof of, you know, your skill, right? But at the same time, if the knife can do its job, then that's good. Okay, so I think that's everything. Yeah, we've done the sharpening, we've done the sharpness test, and overall, I've got a good impression of how this stone works, and yeah, it works very well. So that is it, guys. I hope you enjoyed this sponsored video. This is the first sponsored video I've ever done on my channel. And I want to thank the guys out at Sharp Pebble for sending me this in for the testing and review. And overall, in the end, it's a thumbs up. You know, I've tried a few different stones here and there, especially the Waterstones, and this works very well, I can say honestly. And you know what, guys? I will never promote an inferior product on this channel. You know, you guys subscribe to me, you know, for whatever reason. You know, you like the tutorials, you like, you know, things I do, and I appreciate that very much. And when you guys do subscribe, I don't take that lightly. I take that as a form of trust, because you guys trust that I will provide you, you know, good content. So in the same, when it comes to reviewing stuff, I'll never promote something just because, you know, I was paid to do so. All right, but in the end, stone, yeah, it gets a good review from me. Does its job, and the overall build quality is very good, and the feedback and the ability for this stone to sharpen, just fine. Yeah, so if you guys are looking for a sharpening stone, a nice Waterstone you want to get into freehand sharpening, I would really suggest you check out Sharp Pebble. I'll provide all the necessary links down below. You guys can check it out and let me know what you think. All right. So that is it, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this testing and review, and I'll see you again on the next video. All right. Bye.